Good morning. Thanks for joining us for Inquirer Live, Future of Work. Saludos. My name is Ezequiel Minaya, and I am the Future Work editor on the business desk of the Philadelphia Inquirer. And my hope is that the conversation with our guests this morning will serve as an introduction to the coverage area I've been brought in to lead by a generous grant from the William Penn Foundation. The truth is that the words future of work means different things to different people, to different interests. It means rapidly advancing technology, tech that promises to radically transform the workplace, robotics, artificial intelligence, automation, the Internet of Things. But for most people, these are just buzzwords until you lose your job. But beyond the tech that is sprinting forward, the future of work encompasses pretty much every institution that is trying to keep pace, trying to catch up with that technology. It includes lawmakers, public policy, regulators. It includes universities and schools, unions. It certainly includes the private sector, large companies, small businesses. It includes every stripe of worker, those launching a career, those pivoting to a new line of work, and those contemplating retirement. And for those who are striving for an equitable economic recovery, for those striving for racial equity and gender equality, for those who want to break the cycle of intergenerational poverty, the future of work means an opportunity, a crossroads that presents an opening to address some of the more stubborn challenges impacting Philadelphia and the country. Today, I'm joined by Anne Gemmell, founder and driving force behind the Future Works Alliance PHL, an organization that among its aims is striving to marshal up the resources and leaders of the region to design and advocate for a future in which Philadelphia thrives. She is a former teacher, a former community organizer, former director of special initiatives at the city of Philadelphia. She's one of the first people I met when I moved to Philly. And now she is a futurist with her eyes trained on the future of work. Anne, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. For this chat, you and I, Anne, will tackle the subject in three parts. First, we'll try to define the challenges and opportunities presented by the future of work. We'll then move on to the responses to the forces transforming the workplace from stakeholder institutions like governments, universities, and organizations like yours. And finally, the third part of the pie will explore practical advice, guidance for individuals and people. At the end, we'll have a Q&A. If you'll indulge me, before we get started, I'll go over a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate, those in the audience, participate in today's events. Anytime during the discussion, you'll have the opportunity to submit your questions for Anne. To do so, please ask questions in the comment section at the bottom of this page. If you're watching us on social platforms, please join us for the Q&A at the Inquirer.com FOW Live in order to submit your questions. Okay. So let's chop it up, and let's get into it.
Yeah.
So the first section is defining the challenges and opportunities of the future of work. The future of work is a broad topic, and some folks would say amorphous. It intersects technology, public policy, education, workers' rights. But you're the expert. How do you define the future of work? And is Philadelphia at a crossroads, like I said in my opening remarks?
Yeah, great question. It truly does have a different definition depending on who you're asking. I think if you're asking CEOs of major global companies, they're most concerned with how their own workforce is going to do the work that needs to get done and how they'll maintain their competitive edge. So there's an internal facing future of work set of concerns. But my definition of future work is more systemic and more about the impacts on society. So really, there's three parts to my view of the future of work. One is the churn that technology brings to entire industries. So we're all pretty familiar with, or at least people my age, remember Blockbuster, right? Blockbuster doesn't exist anymore. It was eliminated because of Netflix and the move from brick and mortar to virtual. So erosion of whole industries and creation of whole new industries is a big part of the future of work. That's the first thing. The second thing is automation of tasks that workers do at their jobs. So, the dirty, dull, and dangerous parts of our jobs, we want them to be automated. We want machines to take those things over. And increasingly, there's a market for the creation and sale of the machines. But with artificial intelligence, now software is entering more deeply into taking tasks and performing them better than humans. And it's changing jobs. It's changing occupations. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, it's the future work for me. The last element of a systemic definition of future work is the changing relationship between a worker and the employer, a worker and the work that they get paid to do. So the pandemic has put a lot of people in a remote work situation. And as a result, we've seen this really interesting trend where people are launching their side hustles from their work from home situation, without the eyes and the 9 to 5 clock of their direct supervisors. We've seen a spike in filings at the IRS for new businesses. Really big jump in that. So that's changing. And as well as the gig economy is on a steady increase ever since Uber launched in 2014. Philadelphia saw 16-fold increase in independent contractors filing tax returns. So that's a systemic thing that we need to keep an eye on, because if you're not tethered to an employer, it's harder to access healthcare. It's harder to access unemployment benefits.
Yeah, Blockbuster. I don't know what that is. I'm far too young.
Very good. Very good. We'll go with that.
We've been hearing for a while now that the robots are coming for our jobs, right? Automation, artificial intelligence, the rise of the so-called intelligent technologies are supposedly poised to wipe out entire categories of jobs. And I do find it interesting that you say that it's these technologies are also giving a boost to entrepreneurship. But according to a recent report by a well-known consultancy, some 22% of workers in the Philly region, a quarter, are in jobs that have a high potential for automation. The numbers get scarier when you overlay demographic factors. According to this report, 49% of the average Latino worker's time is at the risk of automation. That's half a day. Your job is automated away. The same threat looms over the Black worker, the average Black worker's day. 43% of their tasks can be automated away. Here comes my question. Does this brave new world, this future of work, present a greater threat to some communities over others? And what are some of the industries and job sectors that are most in the crosshairs?
Absolutely, it presents a threat if we continue to respond in the way that we're responding. Government leaders and institutions themselves are, struggling to keep pace with technology themselves. There's kind of a pandemic of short-term thinking inside of a lot of institutions, which really prevents mid to long-term scenario planning, which is really what a problem of this scale requires. But there are some people who are far more vulnerable to having their job automated. It's irrefutable. It's consistent from, companies like Accenture who publish reports to more conservative institutions like the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. They have consistently agreed with each other, or at least in the ballpark, that, jobs that are at the lower wage, lower educational level, and to some extent, again, that dirty, dull, and dangerous, the jobs that have a lot of high turnover, have a lot of rate of attrition, the employers are incentivized to find better solutions for that work. And in the age of the pandemic, then you layer on the issue of hygienics. So there's absolutely, it's really just about preparing adequately. Like, we can prepare far better than we are. There are other countries in the world that are far better prepared for this because they have thoughtful systems in place that help workers think about these things proactively instead of just allowing, no offense, you're not sensationalist, but, in the vacuum of proactive leadership, talking about solutions on the mid to long-term horizon, you get coverage like you just described. The robots are coming. And so, there needs to be a more proactive message and a better plan for supporting people. Unfortunately, in our labor market, our workforce systems in America, we wait until someone is unemployed and then we provide them with access to job training. prior to that, career awareness, career planning, thinking about, your pivots, thinking about industry trends, it's really on the backs of individuals. And to me, it's not acceptable anymore. There's too much at risk. And we will see a lot of steep human costs if we continue to inadequately prepare.
Well, it's Friday. We don't want to bum people out. So let's talk about opportunities.
Sure. Yeah.
But this transition we're living, this evolution seems to have accelerated because of the pandemic. The future of work will take away jobs. In all seriousness, it will take away jobs, as you mentioned, but it would also create jobs.
Yes.
Where do those opportunities lie?
Well, prediction, I'm not going to predict, but there are clear trends about growing industries, growing sectors that, between retirements and between the nature of the occupation and the technology that exists, there are some occupations that there's far more opportunity on the horizon than others. For example, technology jobs, but there's also project management jobs. There's a number of occupations that are growing, including, construction trades, apprenticeships, occupy middle skills jobs, they're called, where you need some training, but not necessarily a 4-year degree. There's huge opportunity in that space. And there's also more opportunity if employers have a mindset shift towards authentic skills-based hiring, where they really do look at, say, a bartender or a waitress and look at those transferable skills and see that you can bring someone in who can problem solve on their feet, is willing to learn, shows up and works hard, right? Like there's a lot of great transferable skills from quote unquote low skill occupations, which are really just low wage occupations, into middle skill places. If major employers are willing to invest in the internal learning and training systems. But most of all, it's really about understanding what is going on and making a plan for yourself and your family and your students, if you have children, that is aware of the fact that technology is coming at us faster and faster and faster. And the changes are going to be happening faster as AI gets deeper and deeper adoption rates in different industries. So the most important thing is to remain curious and take advantage of this thing called the internet that is amazing, right? It delivers so much knowledge. It delivers courses. It delivers unlimited, you can become, permanently curious with the internet. It's unending. And so really focusing on how we spend our time, what are we learning? That's the question you should be asking yourself. What do I want to, what am I learning, and how is it relevant to the marketplace?
Let me push back a little bit here. When you say you're sending people to the internet and it is unending, I can't see it. Right. I can't think of anything more daunting than to splash into the internet. What would I be looking for?
Well, my point, I was too broad in that response. Absolutely. But, and that's, that's part of what I'm trying to craft a solution for. The Future Works Alliance Philadelphia is trying to create, and we're working to create a better set of guidance, a toolkit for people who have jobs now, but know that job may not be the one that they want to stay in for a long time. What are the careers? So there's a lot of career guidance. There's a lot of coursework out there. And one of the roles we are planning to play very shortly is offering some guidance to people before they're in a very stressful situation, such as unemployment.
Okay. I'm with Anne Gemmell, the founder and leader of Future Works Philadelphia. Future Works Alliance, forgive me, Philadelphia. All right, so section 2 of our talk. We're going to talk about the response to the challenges, the response to the opportunities that we're seeing from governments and other institutional stakeholders, the private sector, schools. So we set the table, right, with a state of play, and pinpointed some of the forces and trends impacting the American workplace. As tech sprints forward, right, how is government, how is the education system, companies and unions responding? Is there even a recognition, or at least agreement, that a response is needed to these transforming forces?
There's definitely agreement that something needs to be done, but there's also competitive forces bearing down on companies, and we've had the pandemic, right? So what has happened in the pandemic, if this isn't a wake-up call to snap people into action in authentic and collaborative ways, I don't know what is. But the disparate impact of a 9.5% unemployment rate that doesn't even take into account like all of the people who have left the workforce in Philadelphia County. They're just not even participating in the workforce. That is, tied, in my view, to the erosion of trust in democracy. That we see an erosion of trust in institutions, and the ability to respond will be, tied to our trust in, leaders to get things done. So there is consensus, but Philadelphia, historically, our region, struggles to collaborate at a deep and wide level, and we haven't really embraced equitable design of solutions. Equity design means that you listen to the folks who are not the PhDs, the people who go to work every day and are looking to get through, have a good quality of life. We do programs and we use data, and we oftentimes institutions impose solutions that they, experts and college educated people feel are very well designed. But then when they hit the ground, we wonder, why they're not well embraced. Well, who did we listen to? Who have we consulted? The high school graduate who just got laid off, Black woman aged 25 to 34, who, by the way, took disproportionate hits in layoffs in the city. So, what are we thinking about in terms of customizing our support systems and adopting a culture of continuous improvement? We haven't done that. And we need to do a better job of that. And that's really a really core element of the Future Works Alliance Philadelphia.
Yeah, and you certainly, from whence you speak. You were in city government. And
yes.
And this is an aspect of my conversations that I learned so much about when we chat is, did you feel like you were just a lone voice in the wilderness when you were in government, warning people, a Cassandra, if you will, warning people about this future work, it's coming, or did you find allies and resources?
That's a funny question. I mean, there are some in the early days, like 3 years ago, when I was first starting to talk about this. It really happened in a weird intersection kind of way. I was researching the majors that my college kids should take that wouldn't become obsolete, and also writing a white paper about adult skills levels and the digital divide, the digital access and literacy gap that we have in Philadelphia, looking at solutions. And I was like, wow, this is a real problem. Like, technology is going to erode occupations and create ones that we don't know about yet. And we have this, we have a problem in Philadelphia of, far too many people read, at very low levels. They're just not equipped right now for the economy that they need to try and participate in. So no, I found great allies in city government. I really loved working for Sheila Ireland, who now works for the governor. There were a lot of people who were like, yes, we need to think about this. We need to start planning on it. Who's doing it? And I basically pitched Sheila that this should be my job. And she was a wonderful person and said, yes, I agree, this should be your job. And I started finding those folks both inside of city government and also at the Federal Reserve and at PIDC. There was a lot of great conversations. There was a small group of people that then it was my job to grow that number of people who understood, who could come to consensus around the problems and also engage in like proactive thinking and preparation around solutions. So definitely not alone. After a few months of talking about it, that people came out of the woodwork, and we finished the work right before the office was scaled down or eliminated, depending on who you talk to. There was hundreds of people, actively engaged on a regular basis from across institutions in the city. So that in large part, those folks have remained engaged and want to continue the work, regardless of whether or not I'm on the city payroll.
Mm. Yeah, well, luckily I'm a newspaper reporter, and that's a real growth industry. So it seems that much of the response to the future of work has been triggered by the pandemic, right? With the health emergency, suddenly aspects of our work life that seem immovable were open to reconsideration, to re-examination, right? Companies began asking, why do we need to spend a mint on office space when the work can be done remotely? Hourly wage workers began to ask, why don't we have sick days and dependent care? Why don't we have the same safety net as white collar workers? Do you think that all of this intense scrutiny goes away once we all get the vaccine and the threat of the pandemic goes away?
I think a lot of trends will stick around, but it's very difficult to predict because there's so many different kinds of cultures inside of all different companies. There's some employers that are much more conservative and more command and control, that they won't be comfortable having everybody work from home. But typically, the technology industries tend to be much more liberal in workplace change. And you've seen that very quickly. Facebook, Salesforce, a number of companies said, everybody, we're working from home for the next year and a half. They made that announcement quickly. You don't hear such broad announcements from more conservative industries and more conservative companies. That said, there definitely needs there was a complete understanding among researchers and economists and policymakers that the next recession, whatever caused it, this is the thinking before the pandemic, whenever the next recession hit, there would be, more rapid adoption of technology in the workplace, and we would see more jobs at risk of automation or more jobs going away. The pandemic is horrible for this situation. I'm just going to be blunt. It's wiping out small businesses. In Philadelphia, we have 70,000 cashiers. So those cashiers, their best hope of not being automated was working at a small business on a commercial corridor for a family or a business that they knew. Target is busy automating. Costco, Amazon, they're automating their cashiers because they can. And so it's a double whammy in the sense that the large companies, they want to be more hygienic and have, move as much goods as possible with the least risk to their labor force. And the pandemic also wiped out, so many small businesses just won't be back. There's some estimates that the jobs lost, about 40% won't be back. So so that I'll just stop there because I'm trying to find a high note to end on. I mean, the good news is that it is a wake up call for a lot of companies, and there is a lot of labor churn right now. People are looking at how well did their employer recognize their humanity. And I think as leaders across systems, we're looking at, well, how well are we recognizing and seeing the humanity of the people who go to work every day? Essential workers, they're getting vaccines first, but they're not getting pay hikes. We're still struggling in Congress to get 15 minimum wage increase. You can debate that all day, but the fact is like a few months ago, these were essential workers, and now we're having, we're hesitant to debate about, a decent wage. So workers who have talent, who have skills, are definitely looking to work in companies that recognize their humanity, that see them as a whole person. And a lot of workers who are laid off and their industries, they don't know when their industries will be back. They are taking their talent and turning it into some potential and pivoting to safer and in many cases more lucrative industries and careers.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because there's a sort of concept bubbling up, or actually bubbling down from the C-suite of inclusive capitalism, in which we think beyond shareholders and think about communities, our workers, Yeah, so that's a great concept. And just to clarify, when you say hygienic, you mean just sort of wiping down surfaces to sort of keep people safe from the virus and the pandemic, right?
No, I mean moving to touchless transactions, where machines are delivering, and the transactions are, robots are pouring drinks. There's a viral video yesterday of robots, minimizing human contact. So machines in meatpacking industries, for example, there's been an increase of implementing those things so that the liability that the company has when they expose workers to the virus is lifted. And by the way, the machines work 24 hours around the clock, and they don't need lunch breaks or health insurance. So.
Wow, robots pouring drinks. Wow. Let's talk about your organization. I think it's safe to say that I'm impressed. It launched last fall, and I believe is modeled after similar efforts in Germany and Canada and Japan. What does the Future Works Alliance hope to bring to the discussion?
Well, we hope to be the place to have the discussion, and bring people, and then come to consensus at the table, align the like minds, and really create the space where the work can continue that was underway in 2018, 2019, and in part 2020 when I worked in city government, continuing that work with many of the same stakeholders, and directing a can-do momentum around a more future resilient region. And I want to emphasize the regional part. A part of why other countries are building tables like this at the national level is to facilitate ongoing trusted collaboration between the inventors of technology and the leaders of universities that have to teach, that have to bring that new technology into their curriculum so the next generation is prepared. So they have these formal collaborative tables, but the US, we had something like that, and Ivanka Trump was like the figurehead around it, and some academic like MIT has convened a great congress around the future of work, and these are national efforts of elites, in large part dominated by consulting companies and researchers, right? But what I'm working to do is bring it to the regional level and bring that equity into an open, transparent dialogue so that the people who are practicing in schools, practicing in job training programs, practicing as policymakers, the people with their sleeves rolled up doing the work need to inform the solutions so that they're operable, sustainable, viable, and that there's a wide consensus. And so I want the Future Works Alliance I want the audience to know that this is an open table. Anyone can come join and bring their perspective as a worker, their perspective as, a stay-at-home care worker for an elderly relative. Everyone can bring their perspective to this table. We're creating systems and operating strategic collaborations that allow for all voices to be heard in an organized way. And those solutions, I think, will be more sustainable and smarter. It's crowdsourcing, innovation. It's crowdsourcing solutions. And I think that, back to that trust issue, the more people that understand this as an open, collaborative process that's operating in public, and, that there's an opportunity there to rebuild trust.
And we'll let folks know how they can get in touch with you at the end of the program. Speaking with Anne Gemmell, founder of the Future Works Alliance. All right, part 3, round 3.
It's like a boxing match, but more fun.
Exactly. I'm on the road. Practical, actionable advice. All right. We've been talking about institutions, ideas. Let's break it down to earth. Let's talk about people. Yeah. What are some advice you would give 3 stakeholders of the future? The student, the transitioning, perhaps unemployed worker, and the small business owner. First, the student. What majors or course, you spoke about your daughter earlier, or first, the student. What majors or courses of study will help students prosper in the future?
Well, first of all, there is a movement to get away from this distinct major. Like, I've earned a credential, I have a major, I have finished learning, and now I will become a worker in the economy. That mindset of first I learn, then I work is over with. Skills that you learn, knowledge, it has a 5-year shelf life. And so there needs to be, for students, a mindset shift that you need to become competent. You need to develop expertise. You need to develop skills and keep them sharp. You need to, constantly remain curious and learning. Now, that said, the things that make us human, right? The skills and expertise that are, communication, for person-to-person communication, the power skills are really important, and you can incorporate them in many majors. They're more central to some majors than others.
I'm sorry, what are power skills?
Power skills are, problem solving, creativity, teamwork, clear and effective communication, empathy. So power skills are those things that really make other people want to work with you at a workplace, right? And make you extra valuable on top of the hard skills that you might have, like, coding or engineering. So I would be remiss without mentioning STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math. As we saw with the pandemic, science has saved us. Mars, we have put an astounding number of capable robots on Mars. And, some people may say that that's so irrelevant and everything else. We are going to learn so much from this pandemic, close to home, and even that science exploration, the space exploration. So I really believe that science will save us. And I'm pushing really hard on my own kids to push them into, the STEM fields. And I'm working, as a parent, obviously, day in and day out, like, on effective communication, effective problem solving, solutions-oriented conflict resolution. These are skills that are missing from the K-12 curriculum, unless you have a great teacher that is folding them into your curriculum. We have a STEM pipeline problem in this country. We have, serious issues that need to be addressed because the talent gap, the demand for STEM workers is going to be through the roof for the foreseeable future. And we're not really doing a great job of building really strong pipelines into those fields. So that's a huge opportunity. Look at cybersecurity. We're all working from home. Companies have, their systems on the cloud. There's so much effort right now going into securing these systems. There's a massive cybersecurity shortage for workers, for example. So that's just a short list, but the major takeaway is match your interests with your talents and never stop learning.
That's interesting. Just to dwell a little longer with the student or poor student who's thinking, what do I do? There's been some corners who say the educational system is out of step with the corporate world. The education system needs to align itself a little bit closer to find out what skills will be profitable in the future. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, with college debt looming over, I mean, it's almost unethical to allow someone to purchase a college major that the institution is not willing to say that this is viable in the marketplace, right? I have a problem with that, like letting people get degrees that really have no strong market demand. So unfortunately, again, in America, a lot of things land on the backs of the buyers, on the backs of the individuals to figure out. I think that's wrong, trying to change that. But that is the reality that, in part, the Future Works Alliance is working to address, is like fill those gaps. But yeah, certainly, we have a K-12 system that is on an agrarian calendar that is still divided into distinct subjects, that are siloed, right? Whereas, the world is not like that anymore. We have knowledge is widely accessible, like running water, yet we send kids to still learn knowledge. We still assess them on knowledge. The school districts that are leading the way are switching to skills-based competency that is untethered to time. It's taught, and universities as well, competency-based learning it's just whenever you demonstrate that you have mastered a particular set of knowledge or you've mastered skills, you get to move on no matter how long or how quickly you learn that. So the whole issue of time and the accessibility of knowledge is really changing learning and how we learn. But again, our institutions are some are changing, some are not, but there's no regional strategy around that. And that's something that the Future Works Alliance in our 3-year plan in years 2 and 3 will be engaging with K-12 leaders around that. And we're certainly not alone in the people who want to make change in that area.
Well, we got questions coming in, so I have a couple of questions to get through that I was hoping to ask, but folks keep pitching us questions. We're going to get to those in a sec. Talking to Anne Gemmell, the boss of the Future Works Alliance, founder and futurist. Next, we're pivoting to the worker.
Yeah.
How do they future-proof their career?
Well, it's not much different than the students, but you have this added element of how good is your employer at providing you with learning opportunities and supporting you in training. So there's definitely an opportunity for the worker to think about, well, if I work at Target or I work at Costco, what are the differences there? And there are real differences. It's not easy to find out, but that's another thing that the Future Works Alliance wants to work on, is like providing some guidance around which companies have the best internal training and internal upskilling and reskilling opportunities. They're not all the same. There's differences in those companies. IBM, for instance, has been an amazing leader for a number of years. They recognized that they had talent shortages in certain occupations and that they were no longer going to need like hardware engineers like they did in the past. And they offered those engineers the opportunity to pivot into occupations that they knew they were going to have. So companies that have a talent strategy are going to be more likely to be thinking about this, right? And other companies are just churning and burning through workers and okay with their attrition rates. So, thoughtful leaders of enterprises, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit, are mindful of the talent wars that are on the horizon, and they're looking at their own pool of workers and saying, you have potential, you have talent, you're one of us. Let's tap into your strengths. Let's see where you want to go, and let's help you get there. So that's a big difference, I think, that workers could keep an eye out for at their workplace. Like really think about, what are the opportunities for my career at this place? Not just my raise, not just is my job safe, and then really take ownership of career management. But, again, it shouldn't be on the backs of individuals. We need to create better, more equitable systems so that it's easier for a motivated cashier to pivot into a strong, STEM career or healthcare field or teaching, right? We have nursing shortages, teacher shortages. It's a lot of the same skills that make a great retail worker. But it's just too challenging for a talented 25-year-old Black or Latino woman to make that change that would require 3 years, of learning or 2 years of learning to really build up the skills and credentials and be, a candidate for a high demand field. We need to build those bridges more intentionally and then communicate effectively to people about the opportunities.
Yeah, that's interesting because before the pandemic and all the job losses, it was a really tight labor market. And companies were really well aware that they really had to fight for the talent. And talent was one of the questions that the Amazon search really kind of hinged on. And Philadelphia made it well into the later rounds of that search, but when it came to the necessary talent for that, we didn't make the cut. And then finally, the small business owner. How does she protect and grow her business in the face of so much change?
I think that, in other countries, they're creating programs and providing services for small businesses to adopt technology and to create not only maintain their brick and mortar presence with the latest technology and accounting tools and, just simple things like, QuickBooks on the cloud and stuff. It's out of reach for many business owners who just simply want to run a childcare center, take care of children. Like, they don't necessarily have the business skills, right? So supports in that range, but then also for other types of businesses, making sure that you have that virtual footprint as well as the brick and mortar. Through the pandemic, my favorite Mexican place right down the street closed down for 6 weeks. There was no app for them, for that family. They were the best in town, but we just, they couldn't do business because they had no touchless digital way to access their great food. Around the corner, Chipotle, they have had an app in place for a long time. It was really not a big deal for them to shift to pandemic mode of social distancing. So the result of this is that the competition really, the corporations like Starbucks, Chipotle, other food service that have the online ordering systems up and running now for years, it was really not a big problem for them. But the small business owner needs to think about, that digital version and also, work together in communities of best practices to learn, the most cutting edge ways to run their business. So it's both an internal, like, tech adoption thing, and also externally to the customer, thinking about, well, how does my customer like to access the things that I'm selling them?
Mm-hmm.
And then another interesting thing is like expertise, right? Like, people tend to undervalue their own expertise. So a small business owner, say they're selling soap. So they're making soap and selling soap. There's a great opportunity in sharing that expertise by selling courses, by having, creating community around your expertise that is tied to the things that you're selling, for example. So that's a really interesting trend in multiple revenue streams for this person's not just a soap seller. This person is an expert and they want to teach you about it. And they want to build a community around people that are also excited about that. So providing those opportunities for human touch and community building, I think, are really key to some of the most successful small businesses that we've seen, like the bookstores in Germantown. There's really good examples of owners that get it.
That's interesting, because you're describing sort of the what a lot of folks in the rural setting did to sort of amplify their businesses once, like rural. I'm thinking about farms giving tours and opening B&Bs, building that kind of community.
Exactly. Yeah. And creating a space for human connection. I think people are starved for that. Ironically, in the pandemic, we're certainly a little pent up about that. But, there's trends, where people are looking for positive community opportunities.
Yeah. Well, let's get to the questions from our audience. Let's see what we have here. My middle-aged eyes are having a hard time. Are there any industries related to climate change or potential solutions to such that can mean more jobs locally in Philadelphia?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a weathering task in front of us. Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia region needs to get ready for a lot of rain. And that means weatherization. That means, new construction, some roads. Our whole airport needs to be elevated. It sits too close to sea level for the climate projections on the horizon. So yes, there's absolutely, and I think the Biden administration is doing a good job tethering, infrastructure spend to systemic, resilience to climate change. Certainly also public transportation needs a massive upgrade. We need to rethink that. We need to make it easier, more seamless, more clean for users. So that's a green thing. And also as I think there's a huge opportunity. This is, a little off on the horizon, but there is going to come a time where mobility is a service, where we just call on a vehicle that we need. And we're already starting to see a reduction in driver's licenses. People, there's a step away from cars, like single ownership cars. And I think there's opportunities to green the spaces in the city and help absorb more of this water. But absolutely, we need to build, more large scale infrastructure that collects water efficiently, because we are going to get much more rain, and we're not ready for that right now. We need to really get ready for that. So yes, this requires massive investment that I hope the federal government will be able to do that.
So how about the other usual suspects here, the wind and solar sectors? Do you see those bringing some jobs to our region?
Well, I'm not really an expert in alternative energy. The Future Works Alliance certainly sees the connection, and that's, again, we want to create the space that brings the experts into that conversation. But when you look at projections on demand for jobs, electricians, there's projected 25% growth in some of the trades of people who would do that work, like install solar, build windmills, all of those occupations, middle skills occupations that you need an apprenticeship training, and you need mentorship systems. You have to get into these pipelines with certain math skills and reading skills to start with. They're projected to grow for the foreseeable future. And, it is with the increases in battery life and the technological advancements around batteries and the storage of renewable energy. I think that we're really looking at, a hopeful future on that front, like a good tech for good example, where we will have, cheaper energy that's cleaner, as the inventors and those STEM majors continue to make breakthroughs on how to store this, how to transport it, how to build the infrastructure to recharge electrical cars. So there's a lot of great progress going on that front. And we just don't have the names of those jobs yet in some cases. So that's really interesting and hopeful.
Yeah. So you're not an expert, huh? That sounded like a good answer.
Solar. No, I don't want to be solar.
Yeah, but can you talk about the potential boon of cannabis legalization could mean for Pennsylvania? And I know this is something that's near and dear.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. In 2014, I met some people at Occupy Philly, and they were, they really wanted me to get involved in, the Free the Weed movement and legalize marijuana. And at the time, it was like, I don't know. And my daughter, one of my daughters, who shall not be named, was caught smoking marijuana outside of her high school with 10 other people. And it just opened my eyes to the whole ridiculous school to prison pipeline around drug use. The only student in that group who was asked to leave her school was African-American male. And I felt like this was, and so I became more educated about that and worked on decriminalizing marijuana in Philadelphia as a result, but have watched, more and more champions come on the bus. And certainly there's a huge opportunity for industry. The problem, again, is that you have these corporate giants coming in, and, they're way ahead of the pack, like Canadian marijuana companies. So there needs to be very careful policy to ensure that there's like equitable access to ownership, not just hiring to be a part of the industry at the retail level, but also, really be involved in the distribution and the growing. But it's such a capital intensive industry, and it's incredibly volatile. So we don't, certainly it's an opportunity for jobs and revenue, and the sales of medicinal during the pandemic were through the roof, just like the sales of alcohol have been. So yeah, I think it's here to stay. And I think that it will generate jobs, but always the question with jobs is, are they quality jobs? Do we provide equitable access to the training and the hiring? Are those companies, thinking about diversity and inclusion when they sell to customers, and when they build their businesses and promote people inside, just like any other company? Hiring, retention, promotion. Are we going to see diverse C-suites in that industry? It remains to be seen. Right now, it's pretty white.
So let's see, we have a question on remote working here. Remote working would seem to me, this is a question, be a much more productive way to work. All right. I work more, not less, without much division between home and work now. You reference people are launching side hustles without supervision from work. But I wonder how many others feel like they've got no time for anything else? Aren't employers aren't employers getting a big bang for their buck lately from their employees? Okay, I get it. So this person is saying remote work, I'm worn out.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is an interesting debate because people say, oh, I work from home. Look at the productivity rates. Like employers are noticing that the productivity is really high, but there is a learning curve from work from home. I transitioned years ago. I worked on a campaign where I worked from home for 5 years. And there's an adjustment period where you're like, wait, I have to set boundaries. I have to create visual cues around when I'm working and when I'm not. I can't start writing email when I haven't changed out of my PJs, right? Like all those boundaries, people are still figuring out. And oh, by the way, if you have young children or children in school, like it's a complete terrible recipe for mental breakdowns. And many women are quitting their jobs as a result of this impossible task of balancing work life with home life. Now, that said, when you look at polling of workers in the work from home situation, 80% of them want to keep doing that. The question, I'm not sure all employers are on the bus. And again, I think it'll be different industry by industry. If you have, Salesforce has already announced, right? And so they're a major vacuum of talent that they can now hire people who want to have that flexibility. So if 80% of your workers prefer to have that flexibility, then that's an opportunity to attract talent for the more forward-thinking companies. But if you're in an industry that's not competing with Salesforce, if you're, an older financial services or more conservative industry, they want to see you at your desk. It remains to be seen if those more conservative industries are going to look at the numbers and say, yeah, we're comfortable with work from home. And some other day we'll talk about worker surveillance. I mean, it's pretty freaky how many companies are purchasing worker surveillance software for their work from home employees. So I think it will vary widely, but I do think that women stand to win after this crisis is over. Women are great collaborators. They're great team leaders. They're great for employee engagement and innovation and creative thinking. And I think more women will thrive when they have the flexibility of working from home in normal times, when kids go back to school, when childcare is up and regular. I think that the work from home flexibility will be a real win for talented and ambitious women who want to keep rising.
I'm so glad that you loop back around to the question of women in the pandemic. It seems that women have really borne the brunt of the economic turmoil and leaving the workforce in large numbers. But you seem hopeful.
Well, I think that so women, there's a wide range. When we talk about work from home, we're really talking about college educated professionals, right? We've been afforded the luxury of working from home. That's not the workforce that cares about this. There's the people who suffered layoffs and are out of the workforce now are disproportionately Black and Hispanic women who have lost their jobs because they're in food service, lost their jobs because they're in retail, and they have to pivot to other things to put food on the table. It's like a much more desperate situation. So I just wanted to distinguish those groups. There are really distinct differences of how people are experiencing the pandemic. So there's a professional woman's headache of my kids are still here and I cannot get this job done. And then there's, high school educated or less than college in industries that were super hard hit, that they're struggling to figure out, like, what are they going to do? Because they have to run their house. They have to put food on the table. This is a very different scenario.
That's great nuance to the question. I think we have time for one more question. How can we ensure that preparing Philadelphia's economy for the age of automation remains a priority post-pandemic. We talked a little bit about this, but seems like
Yeah.
a good one. Seems like a good one to end on.
Yeah, it is a good one to end on because policy does really matter. In a place where workers can work from anywhere, Philadelphia leaders would be very wise to focus on quality of life. I love Philadelphia. I was born here, raised in South Jersey, raised my kids in Center City. I visited cities around the world, and the most beautiful and comfortable and lively cities in the world have strong pedestrian culture. They're green. They have people that actually engage and talk to you. We have that. We have great assets here in Philadelphia, but there's too much trash. We have a poverty problem. Our public transportation needs to be improved. Like, we need to prioritize quality of life issues for the work from anywhere worker and the family that wants to stay here and wants to raise a family here, and the college kids who come to college here. It has to be easy and inviting for them to stay here. And we need to develop and build on the assets that we have. On a business perspective, it's far too hard to thrive in Philadelphia with our fiscal policies. We have it backwards with wage tax. It's a penalty. We're realizing that now that, if you tax the things that can now work from anywhere, instead of taxing the things that are tethered to your geography, that is not forward thinking. Like, we have to have a plan to fix that. Unfortunately, our political dialogue in this city is hyper polarized, very ideological. And so if, business leaders say one thing, then there's a whole set of other leaders who say that is insane and unjust and wrong, right? It's just like, there really is a problem in our dialogue. And again, I'm building a space for problem solvers to come together and really figure it out, because there's too much at stake to have, just the outraged mill drive our politics. Like, we have to get back to problem solving instead of headlines and retweets.
I so love your Philly pride. I'm a native New Yorker by birth, but a Philadelphian by the grace of good fortune, right? So thank you so much for spending this time with us. It's been
pleasure.
Fantastic. I've learned so much. Thank you all for joining our webinar today, Inquirer Live, Future of Work. We hope you enjoyed the shared content. As a reminder, the Future of Work is produced with the support from the William Penn Foundation and the Lenfest Institute for Journalism. Editorial content is created independently of the project's donors. On behalf of the Philadelphia Inquirer, we hope you have a wonderful day, a great weekend, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Cheers.